Justice Verma, thank you very much for giving me time and
Welcome.
for agreeing to speak to me on Frankly Speaking. First of all, right at the very start, I'd like to tell you that I think the work that you've done is absolutely monumental.
It's not I alone, it's a team, and the youngsters, most of them.
But it's something which has touched the hearts of a lot of people. Justice Verma, how much of this will now translate itself into real and effective action?
Personally, I feel this is something which has happened for the first time. It is so unusual that the powers that be, if they ignore it, they'll do so at their own peril. Because this is a sustained effort. It is not led by a leader. Every individual, you see, has been moved by this and appears to be committed. And most of all, the youth, who are the biggest stakeholders and who are certainly to go much longer than any one of us. And the commitment which I saw of that young team which worked for us, you see, it was labor of love, nothing else, and the manner in which there was a peaceful protest, and in spite of provocation, when they were not treated well, when they collected, you see, I mean, the non-violent, peaceful manner in which they responded is something which I am sure Gandhiji, wherever he is, his soul must be resting really in peace.
Is this the groundswell which also inspired you to take up this challenge? Justice
Well,
Verma,
you see, somehow I've been involved in the issue of gender justice for a long time. You see, not merely when I happened to head that bench and write the judgment in the Vishaka case in 1997. Even earlier, a similar matter as Chief Justice of Rajasthan, you see, a similar issue. And that's the environment in which I grew up. So when this request was made to me, I thought not only was it a call to national duty or public duty which I must perform, but that was something which I think I owed to the nation and to the women of this country, the women folk, I see, and that's the reason I responded promptly.
well, I'll come to the whole aspect of whether the government responded as well as they should have to you at a personal level. But may I ask you a few more pertinent issues which have come up in the context of the ongoing debate? Justice Verma, the most relevant issue which is being debated now is that about what do you do when the accused is a minor. Now, one of the accused in this Nirbhaya case, the Delhi gang rape case, was a minor. That means that he will get away with 3 years. There have been reports that the minor was the most barbaric of the lot. There have been press reports to this effect. Has this been a challenge for you, and did you consider this whole aspect?
You see,
while you
I
were
will
filing
not
it?
comment on the merits of the case because that's not my practice to say anything about a matter which is sub judice. But then, you see, in the first place, laws are not made for a particular case or particular situation. It is for general application. So this issue had to be addressed by us on the basis whether it is advisable in the present environment in our country to lower the age from 18 to 16 in the case of juvenile offenders. Now, you see, there's a lot of work which has gone into this, a lot of study, and Professor Ved Kumari, who appeared in that interaction also, who has been working on this field for a long time, you see, she provided data showing research, etc. So by and large, you see, we thought there was no occasion to lower the age, because why does a juvenile become an offender is something which the society itself has also to answer. The issue of trafficking, which we have dealt with, because
That's right.
that's a related issue. Now, a child who may be trafficked, or a child who has gone astray because of the environment in which he was growing, has got into bad habits and bad company. Now, is not the society responsible for it? So all these factors for juvenile justice have been taken into account. And in this context, let me tell you, some 40 years back, when soon after I had become a judge in the Madhya Pradesh High Court. That case probably is by the name of Roop Singh, probably 1973 or 74. A case came in which a juvenile was convicted for murder, being tried in the normal course. In that context, I happened to study this subject, and then all the subsequent legislations are thereafter. And so, I mean, this too is a subject which has engaged me for quite some time. There are good reasons for it, and those who have studied it, the knee-jerk reaction may be that why not reduce it? But we have taken care that in the case of consensual sex, the age has been reduced according to our report. We have recommended from 18 to 16 because, you see, that should not be a ground for harassment of the children.
Understood.
And we have, so, I mean, this is based on, we took into account this argument also, and you will be, I wouldn't say surprised, but you would like to know that the women's group, by and large, who also interacted with us on 19th and 20th when we interacted with so many of them, they were also of the view that this age should not be lowered. Not only no death penalty and no castration, but lowering of this age. Because you don't make law for one particular case.
The only argument in that case is that it will perhaps serve a greater purpose of deterrence. And I'm pushing this point, Justice Verma, because in countries like the UK and the US, they allow minors to be treated like adults in very exceptional cases.
No, it is
should we leave some room for exceptional cases?
No, it is like this. I mean, giving discretion in any of these areas is very dangerous. Now, rarest of rare case for death penalty, I mean, you see, there is so much of arbitrariness in sentencing. Every day you see. So, I am not for any discretion that you have a particular age and stick to it rather than leaving it to the individual discretion of the judges who have to decide it. Then there is another factor. We also took into account the fact that even in the juvenile homes, the protection homes, etc., what is the condition? We found the conditions appalling. As a matter of fact, a couple of children whose testimony we recorded, and of course their identity we haven't disclosed for obvious reasons, hearing what they had gone through was so traumatic that it moved us no end. Now, if that is the environment in which these children grow up, who end up becoming juvenile offenders, then can you put the entire blame only on the juvenile offender? Is not the civil society also answerable for it? If that time comes when the environment is improved, when they are cared for better, so that the society's contribution to their state of criminality is not there, well, one could think of it.
So you would not go with this argument, which is being echoed by people, that retribution must be
actually in sentencing. Retribution is not the entire factor; it's just one, and the emphasis on retribution over the years is actually getting reduced.
Justice Verma, the other point which I would like to pick up, and this is picking up from the popular discourse which took place in the aftermath of the gang rape, is about the death penalty. I want to know from you, you haven't drastically really altered the punishment for rape unless it results in a vegetative state or death, if I understand correctly.
Substantial.
Substantial. Now, why did the panel not enhance punishment in cases of rape, not gang rape?
It is like this: we have provided for minimum sentence. So that difference is made, and you see, so far as death penalty is also concerned, now death penalty, the modern trend is for abolition of death penalty for all offences where it is already provided. So before adding one more offence for death penalty, one had to be too sure that this is something which certainly needs to be done. Here also, the unanimous view of all the women activists who have been working in this field for decades, you see, was against death penalty. Not only that, if you see the percentage of people even where death penalty is provided, say for example for murder, you see, now you will find it is minuscule. And one other impact is that if the standard of proof becomes far stricter when you have to sentence a person to death. That apart, if in a case where there is a rape and also murder, well, 302 is already there, which provides for death penalty. So in a case of that kind, 302 is an additional offense in addition to 376. So, I mean, which provides for death penalty, so it can be given. No difficulty about that. And we have taken care, even though no death penalty we have recommended, but life sentence we have said in certain cases, in these extreme cases,
You have said.
has to be whole of the remaining life.
Yeah, you have. So, you know, I see what you said. You have said that it was a unanimous suggestion of all the women's groups who have been fighting the cause for
Decades.
For decades. And even the current trend, you said,
Yes.
is against the death penalty. This demand of death for rapists was constantly reiterated, Justice Verma, during the protests. Now, there were some political parties, there were some of the youth. I want you, as someone who has dealt with the subject in great detail, to address those constituencies on the program today. What would you say to them? Because
You see, I would say that this demand was a knee-jerk reaction, and the sober view, which is the overwhelming majority, is against death penalty. And who better than the greatest stakeholders, the women, when they, without hesitation, all of them say no death penalty, I mean, that is something which requires the most serious consideration.
Justice Verma, I think the most important part of your report and what you've written are the 10 new rights which were envisaged by your committee for sexual offences. The right to private defence, right against voyeurism, against stalking, you know, right to silence over character. These are you know, path breaking. At the same time, they appear to be taking off from the common need of people, not just women, of the youth.
No.
Will they be acted upon?
They should be, because in appreciation of evidence, you see, what probative value should be attached to the fact that a woman who has been raped, was committed, was habituated to sexual intercourse. The question is, we have defined in great detail consent.
Yes.
And every act which is without the willful consent, so that unless the female concerned has been an equal partner and a willing partner, it is no consent. And simply, if there is silence. Now, silence may be because of so many factors. It may be because of the fear factor. It may be because of so many other factors. Now, therefore, there has to be a positive act indicating that that was a willing act of both persons.
The most important, one of your rights, which I find personally very interesting in the context of the Banda rape case, in the end of 2010, there was this case which Times Now had reported where a woman who was raped by the ruling party MLA went to a police station and instead had cases of theft put upon her as a form of local level political intimidation / distribution. You say there should be a right to seek prosecution of the police officer who does not register an FIR or a complaint of rape, molestation or sexual harassment should be liable for punishment up to 5 years. Justice Verma, this has to be made into a law.
That's right. You see,
this has to be made into a law.
There is a statutory obligation of every police officer to whom such an offence is reported to register the offence and investigate. Not doing it, in a sense, may even amount to abetment. I mean, although we haven't said it in as many words.
You haven't said abetment in as many words.
But then it may, because it facilitates or aids the perpetrator of the crime to get away, because unless FIR is registered and an investigation made, and therefore he is guilty of dereliction of duty, and a very serious duty. So there is no reason
Totally.
why he should not be punished for that. And non-registration of FIRs is one of the major causes which everyone spoke about. So the first thing is to initiate the process, registration and prompt investigation. And that's why, you see, that's the first right. And most often we hear the woman is raped once, she goes to complain,
It's the second.
and it is a continuing rape, if you ask
No,
me.
it has happened also that the woman who has been raped goes to a police
That's
station
it.
and is sexually
Yes,
subjected
abused.
to another violation.
Correct. And then when the trial takes place, then the vulgar manner in which the witness is subjected to examination and cross-examination. So it is that misery living continuously.
But have you been too tough? And now let me tell me if I'm pushing the point too hard. But have you been too tough when you said your panel also introduces a concept of the offence of breach of command?
Yes.
Responsibility, making a senior officer of the security forces liable to 7 to 10 years if a subordinate commits rape. Justice Verma, is this an extreme measure?
No, it may be an extreme measure, but I'll tell you why. It is not that every time a rape is committed by a subordinate, the commanding officer would be responsible. It is only when he had the knowledge or the circumstance indicate that he had a prior knowledge of some kind which required him to discharge his duty to take action to prevent the commission of rape. Now, because in that sense, if you look at it this way, he becomes an accomplice before the act itself. You see, because then he facilitates the commission of that thing. So he has a duty. After all, he is the person controlling his subordinates. If we haven't said that if a person commits rape and the commanding officer had no knowledge, or so that there was nothing that he
But
could
if
have
he's
done.
aware of it.
But if he had knowledge, or the circumstances indicate that he could have had knowledge, because then that's a case of inaction. Now it is only to ensure that they perform this duty which they are bound to, and the women who came from the border areas, you see, I mean, the stories they narrated goes to show that there's total apathy, women being treated as chattels.
Yeah.
So if the constitutional basis on which our entire report is founded, you see, it is not sexuality alone. It is actually the violation of the bodily integrity of the woman, who is entitled to the constitutional guarantee of equality. And that constitutional guarantee of equality requires respect of her dignity in every form. And therefore, everyone who is responsible for ensuring that and preventing any affront to her dignity has to be accountable.
Justice Verma, not just for your report, but for your integrity and for the values that you've stood by. You are today a towering personality in our public life. My question to you is, this report, which has inspired so many readers, viewers, it cannot be locked away in a cupboard somewhere. It has to be acted upon. If this report does not become a law quickly, don't you think this will be a lost opportunity for the people of this country, not just for now but for a long time? This can't be one of those reports. What do you want to be done with this report?
Well, I would say that many things which we have said, there can't be two opinions. I can understand for a few, for example, the last one which you said, well, there may be debate, people would consider, fine. They need more time to see whether that is feasible or not. But there are many things which we have said, which have been talked of for quite some time, and there are no two opinions. Now, where is the difficulty in promulgating an ordinance to implement them straight away? Because that's not something which need to await a debate in the parliament and ordinance issuing
Give
power.
me a few basic parts of your report which you think can be immediately taken as part of an ordinance.
Now, for example, the definition of rape. I
Yes.
mean, those parts which really were also, they have been debated and considered in one house of the parliament, all right. I'm just giving you one example. Now, everyone, I don't think anyone will dispute that the rape, which is the last act, is not the beginning point. It is the end point of what starts with, you see, what was earlier called eve teasing, which we have given other
Sexual
names,
harassment.
because etc., etc. Now, those are things. Sexual harassment, the Vishaka judgment came on 13th of August 1997. They have been drafting a bill for such a long time. Now, we have actually redrafted and given suggestions. Go through them, and whatever, because no one can say that nothing in our recommendations will be.
So you want this to be pushed through in the form of an ordinance?
That which does not need any further debate. Let them decide. I don't mind.
In this session of parliament?
See, ordinance can be issued even before the parliament. You see, ordinance
Any time it can be issued tomorrow morning.
Tomorrow. You see, therefore, I would not like to delineate that area or identify particular things, because leave it to them. It is their job. But I don't think anyone can say that nothing in this report can go through unless debated in parliament. So those things which can be made law without being debated in the parliament, why not an ordinance? That will also show the bona fides, and not only that, that will show the credibility of the institutions of governance, and I am sure that will give more assurance to the modern youth, who are the biggest stakeholders, and the mood I see of this modern youth, well, they won't let it be buried like many others.
And you're saying so itself. Have you said so directly to the government? Anyone in the government?
Well,
I mean, the Home Minister hasn't called you. Let me come to that, Justice Verma. You've done this principally on your own initiative. You haven't received is it true you haven't received a phone call from the Home Minister?
Well, Mr. Chidambaram talked to me on the 23rd afternoon when he requested me for this.
But he's not the Home Minister.
No, he's not the Home Minister. So obviously, it must have been at the behest of the Prime Minister. But the Union Home Minister, I've had no occasion for any conversation with him. But I must say one thing. After we had given the report, a few days thereafter, I received a call from the Minister of State, R.P.N. Singh, who was, I believe he is still not in Delhi, saying that he would like to come and call on me as soon as he comes back. So maybe he would. But that was after the report was given by me, by the Minister of State.
Why is this?
Well,
Why? Since Justice Verma, I can't be indirect by nature. Directly ask, how can work which has been done by you in, I think, a record time on a issue that has gripped the national imagination not been considered important enough for it to be received or responded to directly by the Home Minister? Do you think you have upset a few people? Because you've been very critical also. You're critical of the police. You have slammed the police
why not?
completely for their lack of engagement with the panel.
When I watched on the TV the two smiling faces, which should have been regretful, I mean, I was extremely upset. The Home Secretary praising the Police Commissioner for doing an excellent job. Now, if in 4 days they apprehended the culprits, that was their job after but why didn't they do something to prevent it? And at any rate, I can understand. Even with the best of efforts, some crimes, some offences will happen. Now, you at least try to express sympathy with the victim and also express regret for having not been able to do that. Actually, in the report we have quoted what I had written in the context of Gujarat and NHRC order, that the state's responsibility is not merely to punish the violations of human rights. The state's responsibility is also to prevent any violations. And those violations not only by the state actors, acts and omissions of the state actors, all right, but even of non-state actors. Why? Because within its territorial jurisdiction, it is the responsibility of the state to protect the human rights of every citizen. And therefore, you see, no one can say that there was no failure on this account.
No, I understand, but is there a, my broader question to you is, even after this incident, you may have seen on television and on the media, number of politicians came out and made statements, Justice Verma, which borders on deep-rooted chauvinism, or I would say at best misogyny. That on the one side. On the other side, a lack of response to you from the Director Generals of Police. Not even a phone call from the Home Minister. Justice Verma, please be frank with me.
Yes,
Does this reflect a mindset somewhere?
It does.
It does.
You see, if that is, you see, I said the other day, if the DGPs, I saw a news item in the National Daily saying DGPs ignore Verma or Verma panel, whatever. I laughed at it. I said there's no question of ignoring either I or the committee. It is ignoring a crucial issue which is agitating the minds of not only everyone in the country, but even abroad.
Yes.
The kind of global response that we received during this period was mind-boggling.
Yeah.
Professors from Oxford, Harvard, this, that, all over the world. The Chief Justice of Canadian Supreme Court, she sent a message. Now, something which was engaging the attention not only of everyone in the country, but the world over. If the DGPs, whose primary responsibility is to maintain law and order, you see, don't find time for this, and someone thinks that they have ignored, well, that goes to show their apathy towards the most crucial issue. And that is why we have said, unless there is that degree of sensitivity which is required for the performance of this task, you see, it is difficult to say that you are fit to occupy that position. So we have said, review all these appointees and let only those be there who are sensitive to the issue. Unless you are sensitive to the issue, how are you going to perform?
I think that's very well said. But I think that, that as I said, Justice Verma, you carry with you a strong moral authority. And you've reflected that in all the work that you have done. Most of which I may say so, having known you personally, is pro bono. I think when you say today that the government should consider an ordinance on parts of what you have recommended on which there is no contention, I think that's very important. And I would like to know the response from the political class
yes,
also.
You see, I would be very happy to see if the message is taken. I didn't say it in as many words, but if I remember correctly, I have somewhere in the report mentioned the word promulgation, which is the word normally used in the context of ordinances. You see, not the usual legislation. Ordinance is promulgated. I think somewhere, I can't offhand lay my hands on where it is.
You'll be disappointed if it is not.
This was always in my mind, but I didn't want to say it. I only said this: if this committee, with only private resources and mostly assistance of some 15, 16 youngsters, all, you see, giving their time, only labor of love, nothing else. I mean, if they, for them, 30 days, or to be precise 29 days were enough, then the same period of time for those in authority with all the power and all the infrastructure should be sufficient to do the job.
Well, I think that's a very strong point. Justice Verma, thank you for the opportunity. Thank you for speaking to me on Frankly Speaking. It's a total pleasure talking to you.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.